Hey, thanks for tuning in. Lars has joined me after 3 weeks or so, which is a very funny thing between us because we usually meet twice in a week or something like that. So thanks so much for joining me again, Lars.
All right, thanks for having me. Yeah, this has been kind of a strange Mercury retrograde period in certain respects. It's like,
Yeah. So I
just little things like this. So like where we weren't able to meet for a few weeks. So
yeah, for sure. The online virtual Zoom meeting did not happen for a few weeks, and I'm just
right.
back doing business. So we initially wanted to continue our episode on Hellenistic astrology, but we found a very interesting phenomenon that's happening in the sky that happened in the sky on like the third week of March, which we just lived through. It is one of the most rarest phenomenons that we can find or that we can take notice of is that so many planets except Sun are placed in the 29th degree or the end of the third decan of a particular sign. So that's not something. At least that's not something that I have noticed so far in since 2011 or so that I've been doing astrology. It's very new to me. Like at least it might have happened, but I might not have noticed or something like that. So yeah,
Cool.
uh, maybe we'll just share the screen and just uh, begin what we want to do.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
So, so do you want to begin with Venus in Capricorn or do you want to begin with Mars in Aries?
Yeah, let's look at the Venus because I'm sorry, just trying to find something. Yeah, let's look at the Venus because theoretically, right, if this were like the exact moment somebody was born, Venus would be the Atma Karaka, right?
Yeah,
Because it's the
Venus. Yeah, Venus
planet,
would be the Atma Karaka.
right? Planet with the highest degrees in terms of minutes, right? It's only 3 minutes
Yeah,
higher in degrees than Jupiter. So,
yeah.
I think this is where the technique, there might be some wiggle room. It might be arguable that Jupiter could be the Atmakarika if it was in better condition, for
Hmm.
example, than Venus, because they are so close. And I don't really believe in exact degree kind of stuff. Well, no, that's not completely true. I just mean that, like, I think that the notion of like exact degrees and mathematics being like overblown, which has happened a lot today because of computers, is not something the ancients would have taken into account. So it's conceivably possible that like an ancient astrologer, let's say using these Gemini techniques of the Chaturkarkas, could have like accidentally miscalculated this chart so that Venus was like slightly lower than Jupiter. And then they would think Jupiter's the Atmakarika. But here's the thing is that mystically speaking, that miscalculation could have happened for a so that miscalculation could have actually been what like the cosmos was sort of intending for that astrologer, because to read from Jupiter as the Atmakarika could have been more correct. So I like to sort of delve into these theories a little bit because we get too bogged down in the precision that computers offer. And a lot of astrologers of antiquity didn't even really care that much for precise degrees. And especially in the Navamsha, nowadays we have the precise degrees in the Navamsha, but classically speaking, as far as I know, degrees weren't really important in subcharts at all. It
Ah,
was just, you just wanted the sign, you just wanted the dignity. So I think, we'll talk about that a little bit and whatnot, but yeah, Venus, let's just pretend, Venus is the Atma Karaka, and it's in Capricorn, and it's also in Danishta, it looks like, right?
yeah, wealth signifying nakshatra ruled by Mars.
Yeah. But before we get to that, maybe we should just do a quick overview where basically we thought this was interesting because here in using Lahiri Ayanamsha, we find that like pretty much every planet except Sun and Moon are in the higher degrees of their respective signs. They're all in the last one 1/6 of a sign, which is actually the dead state in the Baladi-Avashtas. And yeah, some people reverse the Baladi-Avashtas, in even signs, but I don't think either of us do that, right? You don't
Ah,
do that, right?
yeah, I don't.
Yeah, I don't like to do it either. I prefer to just stick with the basic logic that the beginning of the sign is the baby and the end is
Old
the
man.
death or the old man. And so they're all in the dead state, right?
Yeah, yeah, but the I have a maybe physically very weak, but the other notion that I stick to is uh, an old age man. I think it's a better analogy. Like a old age man is more matured, and the philosophical and other thinking in terms of achieving the greater truth or understanding the greater truth is much more explicit and indicative in an older man than a younger man. So I
Yeah,
think that is the most important thing here. A person that is born with this particular chart with almost 7 planets in late degrees of a sign is going to be a natural philosopher or a spiritual teacher or something like that. And Jupiter
yeah,
at the end of Scorpio is almost like Jupiter is breaking into Sagittarius, and it is also the
yeah.
Gandanta. So it is,
Good Dante, yeah,
yeah. So there is, and Jupiter is placed in the natural eighth house of Scorpio.
yeah.
So these natives must be easily accepting change or transformation. I mean, transformation of any intensity. I think things will kind of be easy, and they don't really care about any kind of transformation because they are generally not attached to anything. So, as it
Yeah.
is with so many planets at the end of the degree, it is astrologically and astronomically, it is pretty indicative that the planets are just getting ready to make a transition and move into another sign. So when it comes to real life, these people are just going to be that way when we are talking about the aspects related to these signs and these planets. They are not going to be attached in any way uh, with the deeds of that particular sign and the natural basic significations of that particular planet that is just waiting to make a transition into the other sign. So we were talking
Yeah.
about Venus. So these people are
Oh,
not going to be bothered about any relationships. They are just going to. They are not entirely appreciative of the fact that they are in a relationship, or they are not generally very disturbed by the fact that they are kind of detaching from someone. So it is a bit hardcore, pragmatic native that is probably born with this kind of a chart. But I think they can do a greater good to the community that is seeking good philosophy or self-awareness.
sure. And yeah, it's an interesting thing because with all these planets in the dead state, right? With Venus, the Atmakarika especially too, in the dead state, this is a person that maybe would want to actually kind of like drop out of the world.
Yeah, yeah.
Just like not really be in the world. And what's interesting is by the technique of secondary progressions, which is a
Ah,
technique that I know you've explored a lot,
mm.
and it works very well in the context of Jyotish, actually, right? Venus is going to move into the next sign pretty soon after the
The next
person was
day.
born, like the next day. So pretty much like the next year,
Yeah,
of their birth. And so it's actually more like they have an Aquarius Venus in a
Venus.
sense.
Yes, that's also
And
very interesting.
same with Jupiter, right? And Mars
Yeah,
too. But Jupiter's a little slower. But Jupiter still, it might take like 3 or 4 days or something like that. But that's only like 3 or 4 years, or even less. I don't know
yeah.
how.
We'll find it out.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, it's just 1 week, so 7 or 8 days.
Uh, so that would tell me that this person is gonna, for the first 6-7 years of their life, they're gonna have this Scorpio Jupiter, and they might be in some ways kind of a disagreeable child growing up, or they may, they may have there may be some family problems for them. Their family might go through a difficult time while they're growing up. They could experience like loss, maybe like a relative might die or something like that. But then Jupiter, when it moves into Sagittarius, it's almost like, they're going to be on some level reborn. Like they might, if they're if they're an old soul, as people like to say, they might in fact, and they probably would be an old soul, right? Because all these planets are in this dead Avashta. They're going to sort of break through into like a new paradigm. They're going to have some sort of like spiritual realization. And this is also shown in the Navamsha, where Jupiter sits in Pisces. So Jupiter is in two watery rashis, in Scorpio and Pisces. And so Jupiter is like in two moksha signs, Jupiter has a lot of dignity. And then Jupiter's also in the exaltation of Venus there too. So yeah, let me bring it back to Venus, since that's what we were originally supposed to talk about. But Jupiter is so luscious there, So yeah, Venus sitting in Capricorn, and it's interesting that Venus moves to Virgo in the Navamsha, so it becomes fallen in the Navamsha, which is generally speaking kind of a difficult thing to have happen, but it's also the ninth sign from Venus. So just as we have Jupiter breaking into the ninth sign Sagittarius, showing some kind of philosophical, spiritual reawakening for the person, we also have Venus, breaking through into a new sign and becoming, moving into the ninth from itself in the Navamsha, again, perhaps showing that this is the type of person that could become an ascetic or an initiate in a more classical sense. If they were drawn to that kind of a path, they might want to, they might end up joining a ashram, or just being really radical, like, probably pretty soon, actually, from a young age. Again, like probably around the time Jupiter progresses into Sagittarius, that could easily happen for them. And obviously this is like really hypothetical stuff, because we don't have the full chart, but
this is a speculative baby.
But like, if we were to, let's say, just like read from the moon, Venus is, it's interesting because Venus is in the fifth house, right? So this is like a really confident Atmakaraka in the fifth house, so to speak, but then it moves into the sixth and it moves into Virgo and the Navamsha. So then it goes from being this like unwieldy sort of child who's always screaming and yelling and being a brat, a child who perhaps loses one of their relatives or a godfather or somebody like this, perhaps because Jupiter is the Amatya Karaka, which deals with kind of like, it can be like advisors and friends and people like that. But then, Venus moves into Aquarius, and it's still a Saturnic sign, and it's now aspected by Saturn by a third aspect. It's sort of, and it's it's with Mercury retrograde there theoretically, right?
Yeah.
And it's sort of showing like this person starts to maybe question who they really are and like the meaning of their life and that sort of a thing. And we have we have two earthy rashis there ruled by Saturn and Mercury. These are planets that signify like contemplation, asceticism, austerities, and also giving up the world. And Ketu is with Saturn as well, so that adds to that sort of renunciation kind of aspect as well. This is a person who is like you were saying, like not interested in relationship, probably not interested in sex, with that Saturn Ketu, and with the Venus moving into, moving as it's moving kind of thing.
Yeah, there is a lot of other interesting things as well, because as I think you pointed out secondary progressions, which is a brilliant thing. If the natal chart shows that the person is super matured and detached from materialistic things and all the stuff that are generally related to old people, and if the moment we take a secondary progressed chart, all the planets suddenly turn out to be babies, and with each progression of a planet into a new sign, I think there is a suddenly there is a rejuvenating or a refreshing energy that makes these people physically active in terms of manifesting the actual uh, like late degrees position of the natal chart. So
Yeah.
the I mean the physical strength, suddenly the physical strength grows to kind of project what they're actually born to, or propose what they're born to. So if and another interesting thing is, like, we have very close like relationships, astronomical relationships between Venus and Jupiter, Venus and Mars, and
Right.
and
Yeah, the
immediately,
square, the
yeah,
sextile, so on, the
yeah,
Tajika aspects. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And the other interesting thing is that the same aspects are kind of, they carry forward to the secondary progress chart as as all these planets move. And if you note, it's going to be like from a fixed sign, Jupiter is moving into a movable sign, and from a movable sign, Venus is moving into a fixed sign.
Fixed
So
sign. Yeah.
yeah,
Mars
so
too is moving into a fixed
yeah,
sign.
yes, Mars moves from fixed into, sorry, from movable into a fixed sign. So there is a lot of energy shift that is happening, but the astronomical relationship remains intact with a little bit of change in their elements and modality. So there are other. I mean, I think these are the most important changes that kind of happen in a person outwardly rather than inwardly, because I think we should consider the natal chart inwardly here, because that is something that they are born with, and secondary progress chart is kind of a released projection, or like,
Yeah.
yeah, that is the second version of themselves. It
It's
is
like
like,
how their it's how their mind is like subtly changing.
it's like an
Um,
astral projection or something like that. They just remain
sure.
there, and they let their subconscious walk and do things as their natal chart promises. Yeah, I think you can go ahead now.
Yeah, cool. And yeah, and it's like with these three planets that are shifting signs, right? Because Mercury's not. Mercury might much later on because it's retrograde, and Saturn is very slow. So 5 degrees for Saturn, that that could be 30, 40 years easily. I suppose. I'm not
Yeah,
totally sure, but yeah, it could be something like that. So
uh,
Saturn could
I think
conceivably.
not even in 30, 40 years, because Saturn is going to
Okay.
be retrograde. So
Oh, okay. So that too, like it's important to like when you're working with progressions, it's important to note when like retrograde planets will turn direct and when direct planets may turn retrograde in the life of the person. That can really show some interesting like total change of
yeah,
mind for the person. But we have of all of these, right? The only one that's changing nakshatra and sign is Jupiter.
yeah.
Jupiter's moving from Jyeshtha into Mula nakshatra, and that's really interesting to me. You
Yeah,
know,
and
that's a
Mula
big,
Nakshatra is all about detachment and finding the actual origins or roots. So,
yes, and Jyeshtha. I've got this great book here on Tibetan astrology,
okay.
and the author here says about Jyeshtha, the hero filled with courage and determination to overcome, is the key power of this mansion, and through effort and skillful means vanquishes all obstacles and opposing forces. So, and it says favorable for starting a fight. So, so again, you know, this is like an unruly child to me who then, you know, moving into Sagittarius Mula, wanting to contemplate the meaning of life, cutting the very root of attachments and afflictions. This lunar mansion destroys and takes away only what must be destroyed and should be removed, making way for liberation and new creation, negating negativity. And this day is also favorable for starting a fight, but it's also favorable for journeys, according to this book, which is interesting. It even says favorable for marriage, which is kind of strange, but you know, this is the Tibetan tradition, and so there may be some subtle differences and whatnot. But the lordships are the same and whatnot. You know, Ketu is still ruling Mula. And Ketu is there in Sagittarius, you know, so Jupiter will be in the same sign as Ketu, which it rules. And again, this is another symbol of some sort of spiritual awakening, I think. And another thing I noticed real quick is that Saturn is the Matru Karaka, which is the significator of the mother, and it also aspects the moon in this transit chart here by a 10th aspect. And it sits with Ketu, so you kind of got to wonder about this person's mother. You know, what kind of mother might this be? This is a pretty stern, unrelenting woman, possibly, you know, having kind of a lot of issues with the physical world. You know, being maybe spiritually profound lady.
Preaching philosophy and spirituality to an already profound baby that is already profound speculative baby that is born.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Yogananda's mother.
Okay.
You know, she was a really intense lady from his descriptions, and she was like, you know, like obsessively, she was obsessed with like raising him in a spiritual manner. You know, it's very interesting.
Yeah,
and you know, if that is the Matru Karaka, right, then that Matru Karaka sits in the 12th from the Atma Karaka. But so, you know, there could be some disagreements between this person and their mother, but once Venus moves into Aquarius, there'll probably be a better sort of relationship or reinforcement or something like that, because Saturn is ruling Venus, right? So it's responsible for Venus, it's responsible for the native. And when it moves into Aquarius, you know, they'll be in a better sort of natural relationship. But yeah, and then we have that Mars square Venus. You know, that's a really, even though most Vedic astrologers don't necessarily use this, I think it's useful.
Yeah,
especially
extremely.
They're so close, right?
I mean, they're already always ready for turning points in relationships, or they're not ready for any kind of a relationship. So
yeah, and the nakshatras are once again really interesting, because we have Kritika, which is about like cutting and purification, you know, burning and removing excess by fire and leaving only things that are good.
basically,
and
engineering stuff.
Yeah, and Mars is also in Aries, a very, very fiery sign. So again, this person is born into a trial by fire, I think, in many respects. Their first 7 years at least, if not a few more, are, you know, pretty challenging. But then Venus is in Dhanishta, which is the power to work together to bring fame and abundance, and the ability to unite diverse people into a single fabric held together by natural practicality and mutual benefit. So, that's a really interesting nakshatra relationship too with Venus and Mars. It's like, you know, this is a person who may be fighting for some kind of justice or better world, perhaps.
Yeah, sure.
It kind of reminds me a bit. Actually, no. It was reminding me more of Swami Ramalinga. Are you familiar with him?
Ramalinga?
Yeah, he was a very interesting Swami from the 19th century, and he was, you know, he's a great master. By the end of his life, he is said to have dissolved his body into pure light. And so, yeah, they never found his body. He went to a room, never came out. Yeah. And people would look at him and think that he looked like translucent and stuff, because his body was becoming what in Tibet is called the rainbow body, actually. But what's so interesting, the reason this reminds me of Swami Ramalinga is not just because of that, but because he was an individual who really he emphasized like the pure teachings of just wisdom. Like, he didn't practice like traditional Vedic or tantric rituals and stuff, he just like his temple that he created just had like 7 different, I think 7 different colored, like not scarves, but like sheets or whatever hanging, representing like the 7 different layers of reality, and in the middle there was like an opening or something letting in the sun. And so he emphasized light, he emphasized jyoti, light, in his practice and his teachings and his lectures. But what I should be getting to is that he was like a really like ascetic and intense advocate of vegetarianism. So in that sense, like this chart reminds me of that, because it's like, it's almost like the person could be an extremist about something like that, you know, that they would be like an extremist like Swami Ramalinga about vegetarianism.
Let me just share the screen again.
And Swami Ramalinga also fed, he made it a big part of his life's work to feed people as well.
That's very noble, actually.
Yeah, so he did a lot of work, building up these centers where people could come and be fed, and they were always vegetarian food and stuff like that. So
great. So as you said, the Venus and Mars are going to share a relationship from fixed signs as they progress, and that is going to kind of keep their mindset fixed for the very productive part of life. And Mars is probably going to stay in Taurus for 45 years, and Venus is going to stay in Aquarius. The progressed Venus is going to stay in Aquarius for at least 25 to 30 years. So
yeah, okay.
So the establishment and the platform is largely laid, and this person might probably end up getting into a relationship as Venus progresses into Pisces or something like that. But I think that is too much of speculation at this point. So let's
that's pretty out there. But as Venus moves into Aquarius too, right? By Navamsha position, it ends up being in Libra.
Yeah, it ends up being in Libra. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean Jupiter loses his auspicious Navamsha placement in Pisces when he moves by secondary progression. But again, the secondary progressions don't override the birth chart; they just sort of modify it. So, again, we get a continuation of this Mars Jupiter theme for Jupiter. Jupiter doesn't totally escape the Mars theme, right?
Sure.
But Jupiter, I think, it goes from being like an internal struggle to being maybe a more external adventure in consciousness. Jupiter's moving from watery rashis into fiery rashis by progression. And as you said, the Gandanta, which I am still kind of learning about, but from what I understand, the Gandanta is like a very potent and intense turning point in the energies where water is giving way to fire. So there's kind of like a rebirth happening, a birth out of stillness into activity.
Yeah.
And so there's some really profound story there. Astrology really is just storytelling. So for whatever reason, this person is going from, at a very young age, is going from maybe being kind of confused and defiant to being, well, they're still going to be defiant, but instead of just only being defiant, they're going to be quite obsessed, perhaps, or enthusiastic about like really seeking, the truth of things.
Yeah, I think the greatest beginning of all these things will happen as the progressed moon reaches Sagittarius and joins Ketu and Saturn when the native is 9 or 10 years old, and then it'll be even more interesting to find moon go and form a conjunction with Venus and retrograde Mercury.
Yeah,
I think there is there is a lot that we can talk about this speculative baby who is going to be a speculative yogi.
Yeah, and what this child already in a sense knows, if we utilize some other techniques that are a bit more modern, there's this idea that what the moon has already traversed in when the person was born is sort of like those things the person is already familiar with, right? So what is this person's past? This person's past is Mars and Rahu.
Yeah, sure.
This person is very familiar with Mars and Rahu. They're very familiar with getting whatever they want, totally going for it. And again, this is like the bratty little child who just screams and wants more and just doesn't take no for an answer, and is just whatever they lay their hands on, right? Gemini, they just lay their hands on it. And then Mars, they're going to fight to protect it. Like, you can't take this away from me. It's mine, But then the moon, right? Their mind, their consciousness is going to be, as you said, conjoining Jupiter, Ketu, Saturn, Venus, Mercury before it makes its conjunction with the sun. And so in this lifetime, metaphorically, this person is sort of starting to learn more about these things, they're starting to, or whatever. It's not so much that they never have ever in previous incarnations, but the way that their karmas are set up for this incarnation, right? The karma that they came in with that's being emphasized, right? The vasanas are Mars and Rahu, but then the vasanas that are going to counterbalance those things are going to be Jupiter, Ketu, Saturn, Venus, and Mercury. So quite a lot. So this is a person who has quite a lot of changes ahead of them in a sense, and they are probably going to have more than one like major change in their life in terms of how they think about things and what they want out of life. They're not going to be, and there's a lot for them to experience, if
Sure.
It's not to say that they couldn't, reach moksha or some kind of spiritually enlightened.
I think they're already enlightened because they,
You think so?
because they are already born with sun moon opposition and it's full moon. So
it's yeah.
So and they just like they already know and are familiar with Mars and Rahu, they have just about crossed the full moon, and it's like 7 or 8 degrees away from exact full moon. So they are already enlightened, and it is just that.
Maybe like Swami Ramalinga. I mean, when we first looked at this, I immediately thought of Swami Ramalinga for some reason. Like, it just popped into my head. So, I mean, he wasn't necessarily already enlightened, but he was basically already enlightened, like you're talking about.
So Buddha Part 2 is just born, and I think
Buddha Part 2 maybe. Yeah.
So we are just over speculating on this, but the idea
it's fun though. It's really fun.
For sure. And the moment we started the video, we never knew that we would be talking this much. But I think it's not about the speculative baby, but the idea is to get the facts, not necessarily the facts, but the interpretive stuff that goes with so many planets in the late degrees of various signs. So I think it was a very interesting and one of its kind video. So we might not be doing a similar video again in our lives. So
yeah, wow, that's true. Interesting.
Yeah, so I think I'm glad that I found this, and thank you so much for joining me to do this on a very, very short notice, because I think I told you after we met on Zoom, and so as it is, we have always been flexible and we'll continue to be so. So, and yeah,
great.
So check out Lars's website, which is newly designed and newly done. There is a lot of stuff that is going into, Lars's mental apparatus, and will continue to go. Check out his new form of offerings that he has for the clients, and check out his YouTube channel, which is already filled with a lot of information.
Thanks.
Especially the series with Fernando on Yavana Jataka. So, yeah. And thank you so much, and we'll see you again.
All right.